morning, everyone, and welcome to Green Tea webinar. We are very excited to have a wonderful speaker today, and some of you know Beatriz already. Just still would like to introduce her, and she will be the one talking about water. So she's been with Oakvillegreen since 2014, and I've been lucky enough to be working along her site for the past 5 years or so, or maybe more, in different capacities and different organizations. So she's been running all kinds of programming, including DPAVE, Ready for Rain, our youth tutors, and just to name a few. She has a master's degree in water management, along with numerous post-secondary achievements. She's designed and delivered lots of environmental education and outreach programs for a variety of audiences in 3 different countries. She's passionate about green infrastructure and water conservation, and she has a wide knowledge of native plants and invasive species. So I would like to introduce Beatriz to everyone. So thanks for joining. And we have we'll leave some time for discussion. We already have the questions that you were so kind to provide in advance, but feel free to type more questions in the chat, and we can discuss this after the presentation. Welcome, Beatriz.
Thank you, Anelia. Do you want to do the land acknowledgements as well before I take over?
Sure. We would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that in Holton, we are gathering on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Atawandaran, Haudenosaunee, and Métis people. This sacred land surrounding the Great Lakes has been their home and still is for 15,000 years. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to share and care for the land and its gifts in accordance with the Dish with One Spoon, One Palm Belt Covenant, a historic peace agreement made among Indigenous nations that commits to take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. We honor and respect the 4 directions: land, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist.
Thank you, Anelia. Okay, so thank you for that introduction as well. It has been an honor and a pleasure to work with you for that long. And yeah, and thank you everybody for joining us today. As Anelia said, water has always been a passion for me, and that's reflected in my studies and what I have done for a long time. I have to apologize if there's a lot of background noise. My internet was not working at home, so I'm actually at a Starbucks. So I hope that it's not too noisy, but if it gets too noisy, please let me know, and I can really project my voice and try not to, so I don't bother the people that are sitting and enjoying coffee around me, but I don't mind if I need to do that. So first of all, I want to introduce the organization for the people that are not familiar with what we do. So we are part of Oakvillegreen, which is an environmental charity that has been working in Oakville since the 2000s. And what we try to do is to make sure that people are aware of the ecosystems and the problems that our urban habitats are facing. And our favorite part, and I think I can speak for everyone, is the actual hands-on and stewardship activities that we do with volunteers on the ground. And we work with invasive species, and we work planting trees, and water is obviously a key aspect of the environment and the ecosystems in Oakville and around the Great Lakes, right? So this program that or we are actually getting these presentations to you through our Green Connections program, which is a program for adults that are 55 plus. And this is one of the green teas. So if you're if you're here, it's because you already know about our program and what we do, and we thank you very much for participating. But there are a lot of different activities that we can provide and where you can participate as seniors. So if you have any questions or if you want to learn more, you can always send us an email to the email where you receive like the registration and the link, and we'll be happy to provide more details about future and coming events. Okay, then so let me start right away. So water is essential for life. I think we are extremely lucky in Ontario. There's water all around us. Like whatever if we go outside, if we walk, when we drive around, there's lakes, there's streams, like there's water everywhere here. We have plenty of water, but at the same time, we have a huge responsibility to take care of that water. As you can tell, because of my accent, I am not from here. I was actually born and raised in Mexico. And in some areas in Mexico where water was not plentiful. So we had issues like when I was growing up, there were places where you could only access water, you would only get water in your home during the day, not at night. So you would have to like shower and do all your activities with water during the day. So I think water conservation was an integral part of our education. And that's how I grew up, being always very conscious about water. And it was a shock for me when I came here to see how much water was everywhere, but not only that, but how the conscious of taking care of that water is not as embedded in the culture as it is in other places. As I said, like in Mexico, in the places where I lived, it was more like it was in some areas, it was even like a desert. So there was the whole precipitation for a year is sometimes what we get here in 1 or 2 days, right? So there's not a lot of like water over there. And that's why my passion for water comes from. And why is it important to us? Well, not only because every single ecosystem and everything needs water, but because we are mostly made out of water. So if you look at the picture that I have over there on the screen, that is like if we could actually extract all the water, put all the water together, that's about how much water we need or we have in our body. When we're talking about adults, it's about 60%. If we're talking about babies or kids, that's even actually larger. And we not only need water, but we need high quality water. Most of the world's diseases come from not potable water or diseases that can be actually spread through water. Obviously not in Canada, but in other places in the world, right? As I mentioned before, like Ontario is an extremely lucky place because there's water everywhere, but with that comes a huge responsibility to take care of the resources that we have available to us. Now, I think, and I'm sure you'll learn, I remember that for me, it was a long time ago, like the water cycle, and we always see how evapotranspiration works and how the water goes into the clouds and then it rains again and it gets into the lakes and into the rivers. And that's how the whole cycle works over and over again. But we have disrupted that cycle. So in our cities, the cycle does not work as it used to work before. And that has affected the ecosystems that we have around water. So instead of most of the water being infiltrated, either shallow or deep infiltration, and just a little bit of the water was runoff, now we have changed that. So most of the water that falls into our streets and in our cities becomes runoff, and there's less infiltration. And most of it just runs off and goes directly into our waterways. So our lake, the creeks, and the streams that we have over Oakville, the water does not get treated before it is dumped into those areas. So it flows directly over there. So that's an important part of water conservation. And some of the tips that I'm going to give you today are in order to reduce that runoff and be able to not only save water in our homes, but at the same time trying to restore that water cycle or help to reduce the runoff or the impact in our own homes. And why is this important? Well, if you look at the Conservation Halton has a watershed report card. We are part of the Conservation Halton's watershed in Oakville. And these are the grades that we were given based on our forest conditions, groundwater quality, impervious land cover, and surface water quality. So even though Oakville looks green, and we can see a lot of green, there's still a lot of impervious land cover. So we do have a huge amount of impervious land cover, and the surface water quality is actually pretty low, and that is due to the runoff, a lot of the salt that we use in our homes, a lot of the things that are on the road, and fertilizers that flow directly into our streams and reduce the amount of the water quality in our rivers and lakes. Okay, now this is what we are here for. And again, if you have any questions, please put them, write them on the chat. I'm trying to give you different examples and different ways in which you can save water in your gardens, mostly outdoors, but I'm going to talk a little bit about indoors as well. And I try to incorporate some of the questions that you asked previously into the presentation, but if I miss anything, please let me know. So these are the big ideas that we're going to just look into with more detail moving forward throughout the presentation. The first one is to try to use a water efficient design. So design is going to be key in order for us to reduce the amount of water that we use in our gardens, right? The second one is water collection and reuse, which is another basic thing that is getting more and more popular, and it is moving forward probably what we are going to all be encouraged to do through municipalities. There's a lot of municipalities that already have programs and rebates for water collection and then reuse. Watering schedules and best practices when we actually water our gardens is another important topic that we're going to discuss today. Picking the right plants, it's another important aspect. And then we're going to incorporate other options like rain gardens and other features that can actually help us to reduce the amount of water that we use in our gardens. So let's get started. So use water efficient designs. We have the idea that a nice backyard or a nice area is like a huge area with a lot of lawn, and there are a few bushes, there are a few flowers on the edges. And that is not very water efficient. I had a professor in university that was always used to say that if you need to water your lawn or if you need to water your plants, they should not be there. You should not have planted those species in that specific location. So making sure that we incorporate a combination of trees and shrubs and flowers at the same in the same spaces where we have only or exclusively grass, that would actually help our gardens to become more water efficient. And then we have to select the plants according to the type of soil that we have, the sunlight conditions. So if we have sandy soils and we pick plants that need a lot of water, that means that we're going to have to water them more often because the sand does not hold the water as good as the clay does. Luckily for us, most of Oakville is actually clay, but there are some areas where we have sand soil. So I think the first tip that I can give you in order to design a water efficient garden is to look at the type of soil that you have and then pick the plants according to that specific type of soil. Again, the more sand you have in your soil, the more water you're going to need because that water is going to be filtrate faster, and it won't be available for the plants as long. Like for long periods of time. A way to solve that is to add more organic matter while you're planting. So that helps to maintain the moist a little bit longer. But yeah, just plant according to that. The other one is sunlight conditions as well. So if you have like a very sunny spot compared to a shady spot, there are different types of plants that you can pick either for one or for the other. And again, that would affect the amount of water that stays on the ground too. So if it's a very open space and it gets a lot of sunlight, there's more evapotranspiration, so less water stays on the ground. We can use mulch to keep that moisture. So mulching is a very important way in which we can actually be water efficient as well. It not only protects the plants from the harsh weather and like the cold snaps and the extreme heat, but at the same time, it helps to keep the moisture in, right? So picking the right location, picking the right plants, mulching, so we can keep that part of that moisture on the ground. That is very important. And obviously incorporate native plants that are used to the amount of water that we get here and the weather conditions, right? If I try to plant a banana plant in my garden in Ontario, I will need to add a lot of water in order for it to survive because it's used to a lot of water and probably the cold. But if I'm talking just about the amount of water that I would have to use, obviously it's way more than if I incorporate native plants and use plants that are used to the weather patterns here and the amount of rain that we get and snow and all that stuff. So native plants is a great way in which we can actually reduce the amount of water that we use. And there's different like native grasses that are extremely water efficient as well. Now, the second aspect that I wanted to talk about was water schedule. And this is very important as well because it would help to prevent diseases on the plants that we have. And then on top of that, it will help to reduce evapotranspiration as well. So the best time to water your plants is early in the morning, usually before 9 a.m. It can be like even like before 10 or whatever, but it's like before it gets too warm. We don't have like a very large growing season here in Ontario, or at least not compared to places like Mexico, where I come from, where you can actually grow all year round and you have to water your plants all year round. Here we only have like a short period of time where we are going to have to water our plants, and usually it is very dry and it is very dry and hot, right? If you water early in the morning, the water has more chances to actually get absorbed into the soil and stay in the soil a little bit longer. It's better to water in the morning because there are some plants that if you water at night, there are some fungi infections that can actually affect your plant. So it's better to water in the morning. If that's not possible, then the other best time, I guess, it's between like 7 and 9 at night, where again, like the sun is not there anymore and the moisture can stay on the ground, but it's not good for most plants. If it's grass, it doesn't matter. But if there are other plants, that they can be affected by some of the fungi that can grow on the leaves or can go through the leaves and affect the plant that way. Then the other important part of it, besides the making sure that the schedule is appropriate, is to encourage deep root growth. So you have to water deeply and less often. So instead of watering every single day just for like a few minutes and then watering again, just like not a very long period of time. And I've seen this, like I know, like I have talked with most of my neighbors, because a lot of people just like water the lawn, for example, just for a little bit, and the water stays on the surface, and then they water every day, but just like a little bit. So by doing that, the moist stays only on the top part of the soil, and then that does not encourage deep roots. The best way in order for us to, in the long term, avoid having to water so often is to make sure that we water less often, but we really soak the water so then the ground is wet. It like not only the top part of the soil, but actually it goes deeper. So then the roots are encouraged to go deeper, and that helps them in periods of drought as well. So it is better to just water less often, but make sure that you do it deeply and you really wet the soil. Then there was a question about if you should water trees. And I think in the case of that question, it depends on a lot of things, but one of the things, like, it depends on the type of tree that you have. Native trees need less water, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that we don't need to water them. But it's not as much as a schedule, but the issue is more how hot and how dry it has been. So we do have to water them, but it doesn't mean that we have to put it on a schedule. If it has rained a lot, then you don't have to water them. So it's more trying to look at the amount of water that has fallen, the amount of snow that melted in the area, and how dry and how hot the previous weeks have been, right? If we are talking about a new tree or just a tree that we have just planted or is small, then the watering goes around the trunk, because the whole seed bowl is pretty close to where the trunk is, right? So that's where you should do it. Most of the time, what you have to do is to ensure that the first 6 to 9 inches of soil are wet. So same thing. So it's better to give it a really good soak and making sure that the water goes all the way down instead of just to the surface, because again, you're encouraging those roots to go a little bit deeper, and that would make the trees stronger. It will prevent problems in the future, and it will make it more drought resilient. when you're talking about a tree that is already established, it's easy to see when these trees are stressed because of water. Usually the leaves look different; they look kind of sad. Sometimes when like early in the morning they're fine, but then by the end of the day they look a little bit droopy. So those are some signs where you can tell that a tree is being stressed or has is lacking water. So I have over there like a diagram that shows kind of like what you have to do. So if you can see the circle in the center, that is actually where the trunk is. And then it says irrigate from like the white circle to the blue circle. So because the roots go like around the canopy and a little bit more, that's the best way or the best area to water trees that have, I think I have another image. Yeah, there we go. So that's the best place to actually water trees that are older and very well established. So once trees are established, you don't have to really water around the trunk, but more a little bit farther. So what I usually say is just go like 2-3 feet away from the trunk if it's a larger tree, and then like water over there. Usually the roots that are going to be absorbing the water are not the ones that are just below the trunk, are the ones that are a little bit farther. Again, that is when the tree is already established. If the tree is not established or is younger, then you do have to water around the trunk where the bowl of the roots is there, right? Okay, so another great way to save water and conserve water is to collect water and then reuse it. One of my favorite ways to do that is actually using rain barrels. I do have rain barrels in my place, and what I do with those rain barrels is to water all the plants that I use for food. So all my garden, because plants prefer the water from the rain than the water that we get from the tap, right? Because that one has chlorine, and it's not like, that's not what plants are used to. So it's way better to get rainwater to water them. In the case of the system that I have here in the picture, all those rain barrels are connected one to the other, right? So when you get a big rainfall, the first rain barrel gets full, and then it can pass to the next one and then to the next one. If you're going to connect a rain barrel, it's important to make sure that your downspout is connected to the rain barrel, but then you have an outlet for the extra flow to exit the rain barrel, and then make sure that exit is away from or flows away from your foundation. Any of your downspouts, or even the extra water that flows out of through the outlet of your rain barrel should be not only away from the foundation, but if you can direct that into either a rain garden or your lawn, so then that water does not go into, let's say, I don't know, your driveway, and then it goes straight into the storm drain, right? So we are actually using or trying to keep all that water away from the runoff, that extra water that goes through the streets and into our creeks and our lakes, because again, this will save us water, but we are doing it. These type of features really help the environment. After big rainfalls, again, most of the water used to be absorbed or infiltrated in the water, because that's not into the soil, and because that's not happening anymore. All that water, instead of getting infiltrated, because we have paved everything, goes straight into the stream. So the flow that we get into our streams and our creeks is way higher than what it was before. So it's not only dirty because it goes through our streets and it picks up a lot of the chemicals and the salt and all that stuff, but on top of that, animals and the living organisms that are in that water were not used to that huge peak in flow. So they were used to some changes in flow, but not as much, right? So these would actually help in many different ways. We are capturing water when it falls, which is very important. And again, talking about restoring part of that water cycle, right? And then that water can be used in your garden. So you would reduce the amount, your water bill and your energy bill, because every time that you save water, you're actually saving energy as well. But on top of that, you're helping the environment too. And as I mentioned before, plants like garden plants and tomatoes, all food prefers this type of water too when you're watering them. Now, there are systems like rain barrels, as I said, is one of the simplest way to do it. there is like rainbarrel.ca has like very good, like they can sell you everything from like the connectors and everything. They're very helpful. But if you go to like Home Depot, like any of those big stores, they do have rain barrels as well. They're usually very easy to connect. And as I said, it's a great way. Having them a little bit higher always works as well, because then that way the water can flow. Like you can connect these ones. I don't see the connection, but the one that I have at home, I just have it a little bit higher from the rest of my garden, and then I just plug my hose directly into the rain garden, and I can use that to water instead of having to like carry from one place to another, right? So just if you put it a little bit higher, then with like the potential energy that you have saved there just because of the difference in height, then you can actually get your garden or your lawn water without a lot of effort from your part. There's larger water systems, right? Water harvesting systems that can be used inside of the home. Like here, for example, the city of Guelph has a very good, like an incentive program where you can have a big system or a larger system that you can even put like into your garage or in your basement, and that water can be used for flushing the toilets. It can be used for laundry. So there are systems that exist out there that are already, like you can hire a contractor and they can go in and they put the whole system in for you. Some of them work with water from the rain. So just like a rain barrel, but a huge rain barrel that has a more like a treatment, or the water gets treated before it can be used into the house. Or there are gray water reuse systems as well. So a lot of the times the water from the especially from the showers or the bathtub, can actually be used to, again, after treatment, because here in Ontario, if the rainwater or the gray water is going to be used inside of the home, it has to be treated. And there are specific treatments that you have to follow in order to be compliant with the Ontario Building Code. And I think it's like water reuse for toilet, something like that in Ontario. So there are certain bylaws that you have to follow if you do that. But again, if you hire a contractor, they will know about that. And I think this is the future of water conservation. I think we're going to be seeing more and more examples of these type of systems that are ready to use. You can plug them directly into your house, and they save a huge amount of money and a huge amount of water, right? If just toilets are about 30% of the water that we use in our home. So if we can put a system that we use with rainwater that can flush our toilets, we would be reducing and saving about 30% of the water in our home. So there's a lot of systems out there. Somebody asked about gray water and how to use water from the shower. As long as you're not using soap, and that's one of the things that I want to use. If you're going to reuse water, you can reuse water, but if you're using soap or water from your shower, then you have to be a little bit careful with where you put it, because a lot of the soaps that we use, or even like dishwater too, like they do have not only like some food that can attract like rodents or other wildlife into your garden if you're trying to water with that, but on top of that, there might be some bacteria there, so it can be a health hazard. So there are certain rules in order for you to do that. If you're just using the water from, let's say, like from your shower while it warms up enough, so you just put a bucket there and you get that water and then you want to use that one, that's perfectly fine. But if it's going to have either like body oils or things like that, or soap, then there are certain considerations that you have to take. And we can chat a little bit more about that at the end, so we can make it more like a conversation. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. Somebody asked as well about water from after like boiling your veggies. That's fine. Like that water actually provides a lot of nutrients. Just make sure that it's not too concentrated, but it can provide a lot of the nutrients and the minerals that your plants do. So it works kind of like a fertilizer at the same time as watering. You can just dilute it a little bit, or a much, depending on how diluted, how strong your stock is. And yes, definitely you can use it for watering your plants. Again, it will depend. Like some of them can have a strong odor, and you may attract raccoons and things like that to your garden. So you have to consider that as well. Now, I want to talk about rain gardens because this is for me an amazing feature that we can have in our gardens and in our homes that can help us to save a lot of water. But on top of that, again, restoring the water cycle, and it looks beautiful. So for me, it has a lot of different benefits. And rain gardens sounds a little bit too complicated, but it's basically just a garden where you are just doing like a very deep, you just dig a little bit deeper and you amend the soil in that area to add a little bit of sand, a little bit of the organic matter, and a little bit of the clay or the normal soil that you're having in your area. And that helps the plants to get like the roots are a little bit deeper because of that combination that is over there. And it works kind of like a big bowl or a container where that water can stay there. So, and I'm not talking about a pond. When you're talking about rain garden, the rain garden should dry out in 24 to 48 hours. Right? And then on the surface, it looks just like a normal garden. It's just the bowl is a little bit deeper, and the shape that you use, you have to have like a berm on both sides just to keep the water in that space. But this is a great way, like you just send all the downspouts directly into the garden, so the water flows in there, and it helps again to keep the water in one area. You just have to make sure that it is away from the foundations, and there are certain rules that you have to follow around like rain gardens. But I think this is an amazing feature that we can all add into our gardens, and it's a great way to save water and at the same time help the environment. So here are some of the benefits. So the picture that I have over there is a rain garden. So it's like on a parking lot. So this rain garden was designed to capture the water from the parking lot. So the water flows from the parking lot into the rain garden. So instead of, and then you cannot see it in the picture, but to the right, there is like the storm drain is there. So the water used to go straight from the parking lot into the storm drain and then into our creeks, right? And now it stays there. It helps to filtrate the salt and some of the pollutants that can be in the parking lot, and absorbs a lot of that water that before was just running off directly into the storm drain, right? Then depending on what type of plants you put in there, you can increase biodiversity and you can help pollinators, other wildlife. So for me, this is like a win-win situation in like every single aspect that I can think about, right? We are helping so many different aspects. As you know, like when we're talking about environment and habitats, everything is connected. And I think rain gardens is an amazing example of that. What we are trying to do is to restore what nature has been doing for millions of years, right? Which is making sure that you have good biodiversity at the top, many different plants that are, the selection for rain garden plants is a little bit, I wouldn't say tricky, but you have to be careful because these plants have to be, because there's very good drainage. They have to be tolerant to drought, but at the same time, they're going to be flooded for some time too, right? So you have to pick plants that can actually withstand both, and they are salt tolerant. Because in most places, unless you have it in your home and then you know that it's only water that is coming from your roof, but if it's going to be in a parking lot or in a place like this, you have to make sure that they're salt tolerant as well. So rain gardens is an amazing way in which you can actually save a lot of water or reduce the runoff. And it's an amazing way to beautify and add biodiversity into your garden while helping a huge deal, the water quality in our area and our watershed. Here are some examples of the type of species that we use for rain gardens. And you can put in rain gardens, you can put everything from actual bushes to a lot of like our native flowers and native grasses. We have a few rain gardens. If you feel like you want to go and see one in person, there's one at the Church of the Incarnation that we put there just beside the parking lot. So in the Church of the Incarnation one, the water from the parking lot goes into that rain garden. We have another one on San Luke's Church, which is the church that is just off Dundas. That one is beautiful, and it's the water from the roof that goes straight into the rain garden. And they had a problem with a lot of icy water getting below their air conditioning and their furnace, which was like outside some of that equipment, and they were having a lot of issues with that. And then we sent that water basically to the other side through a bridge. Like it's nice and it's really well done. So we sent all the water over there, and it flows down and keeps the plants watered in that area, and it's a good variety of plants too. Okay. Now, other water conservation tips, again, like for outside. As I mentioned, and I think I have said this a few times before, so try to avoid the use of salt in the winter. That was another thing that really shocked me when I moved here, was the amount of salt that we need to use. Obviously, I was not, and I understand the safety reasons about, like behind it. I come from a place where we do not have to use salt at all. You know, we are never below zero, but that was one of the things that really shocked me, because that water, that salt, does not get treated before getting into our streams. So in Oakville, we have, especially like 14 Mile Creek is the one that has the highest concentrations of salt, but there are certain months of the year where that concentration is actually higher than in the ocean. And if you remember from like when you took science in school, the effect that can have in some of our like soft water species, it's huge, right? Like all frogs, salamanders, fish can be affected highly by that. So we are affecting like the water quality. Avoid the use of fertilizers and weed killers during growing season. Again, all those fertilizers that are not natural can help to, it's called eutrophication. So it's when like the amount of like potassium and sodium, like all those nutrients that we need in the soil, those extra nutrients after it rains go straight into our waterways, and they increase the amount of nutrients that are in our lakes and our streams, and that can produce like algae blooms, and it can cause a lot of problems too. And weed killers, the same thing, right? Like if they kill weeds in your garden, then when it rains and those weed killers, those chemicals get into our waterways, they do affect the aquatic plants, just as they would affect a dandelion, right? Because it's the same like the same tissue. Then I already mentioned it, but like collect the water from the shower or the tap when you're using it. Like I've seen a lot of people that turn on like the tap water in order to drink, and they just wait until the water is cold enough for them to drink it, and they're just wasting that water. So you can either have like a jug in the fridge so it stays cold all the time, or use that water to water your indoor plants or your plants outside. The same when if you wait a long time, or if in your house it takes a long time for the water to warm up, you can collect that water and then use it somewhere or somehow within your house. And then other water conservation tips. So there are water timers. Like I remember when my kids were little, I had one of the cooking thing, like, and each of my kids had like a different animal that they could use during their showers, and just like the cooking timers that you use. So it would ring after 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however, I don't know how long. I always joke with them, like, I don't know what else can they do after washing themselves. Like I don't see how you can spend more than 5 hours cleaning yourself. 5 minutes cleaning yourself. So that's one way in which we can make sure that we are not going past that. Now that they're teenagers, they use songs. So they have to shower in 2 or 3 songs, depending on the song, how long the songs are. So that's a good way to save water. Use a shower instead of the tub to change your toilets and appliances for water smart certified options or water efficient options. So I'm not suggesting that you go home and you like take all your toilets, but when you are going to replace them, try to look for options that are more water efficient. There's a lot of again, there are in some places rebates for those, and you can now get like 3 liter toilets per flush, like 3 liters per flush toilets, which before, like when we were I don't know, in the 80s, it was 13 liters per flush. So that has changed a lot, and they are efficient now, right? Or even if you have the dual flush, really use either like the low flush or the high flush instead of using the high flush every time. So there are different ways in which you can do that. Avoid using the toilets as garbage cans. Like there's use the garbage can for that, and then use the toilets only, or flush the toilets only when you really need to use those. And check your toilets for leaks. In Ontario, it is estimated that about 30% of toilets are leaky. And one way to do that, like there are different I think Home Depot has them, which there are like some peels that you put in the tank, and then you just wait about 15 minutes. If you see any of that, and it's like bright blue, if you see any of that color like you put it in the tank, and if you actually see it in the bowl, that is because your water is leaking. If you don't have those, you can use Kool-Aid or any other, like even food coloring can be used for that, right? So you put it in the tank, just put a few drops to make sure that you can see the color, and then just wait for 15 minutes. If there's any color in your bowl, that means that you have a leak in your toilet. Leaky toilets can waste up, like, depending on how leaky it is, but sometimes even like 200 liters per day. So that is a good way to avoid wasting a lot of water. And that is a good tip, I think, just making sure that it's not leaky, because a lot of the times it's very, like, it's silence, right? Like you cannot really see it because it's just a little bit and it's leaking through the back or whatever, and it's really hard to tell. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, but a lot of the times it's not. So just check for that. Okay, so again, like, I think like this talk was about water conservation, but as you saw through the whole thing, I cannot I cannot avoid talking about the habitat and nature in general, because I think everything is connected, right? And water is part of nature. And while we are trying to conserve water, it's basically because what we are doing in the long run is actually trying to conserve the environment and our own species, if we want to be, I don't know, selfish about it, right? So I don't know, we have like 16 minutes for questions. So if anybody, I think I answered all the questions that were that were sent before, but if there are any extra questions.
So Beatriz, I see some in the chat. I'm just looking at the ones that were listed in the registration form, but I think you pretty much addressed most of them. There was a question, rather a comment, that someone is living on a steep hill where all the water is draining down towards the house. So just wondering if there are any suggestions about that.
Sure. So there are definitely plants that you can put on a slope. And I don't know what is in that slope right now. I would recommend either like a rain garden at the bottom or like a French drain or something like that, to make sure that that water is not staying in the area, or it's getting absorbed and then flowing away from the property. Again, I think I can share my email, and I'm doing that right now. So if people want to, like, if they send me pictures, I can actually send like a specific, oh, I don't know, it's not letting me do it. I don't know why. Okay, but so you can either, yeah, I don't know why, like I'm trying to send it, but it's not letting me. It says something about like why I cannot send it, but whatever. Okay, everyone in the meeting, there you go. Okay, so if you send me a picture, I can give you like more specific, based on the actual location. But the things that you can do is there are specific gardens or plants that you can put on the slope that will actually reduce the amount of flow. A lot of the times that's not your property, so you cannot work on that. But then I would recommend either a rain garden or a French drain before it gets to your home. So then the water stays there and it flows away from the property. So those are like working with the slope on those areas and how deep you need it. There's calculations that you can make depending on how much water is flowing into there, what's the capturing area, and then you can actually work around that to make sure that you reduce the amount of water flowing into your property, to prevent like your basement flooding or your foundation issues because of that extra water getting into your area. But there's definitely things that you can do, and I would recommend, like, I think French drain would be, depending on how big the area is, even a French drain can actually help with that, which is basically like a glorified ditch, to say it in like a nice way. But it's just, again, like you do similar to a rain garden, but you do it in like in a ditch, yeah, and then it takes the water away from the property and into the area. I can send a list of indigenous plants that are drought tolerant. Yes. So what we can do is, when we send the email of the like after a presentation, I think, Anelia, I think you sent an email after, right, to all the participants.
We can do that for sure.
Okay, so I'll send a list of indigenous plants that are drought tolerant. Yes, I will do that.
Perfect, thank you. Another question we have in the chat: in my neighborhood, many want to not deal with boulevards, small patches in front of house, so they put in weed cloth and rocks on top. Is that an acceptable solution instead of grass? And other plants and trees are not permitted.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. Okay, so the problem, I usually don't recommend the landscape fabric, which is basically what they put there, because it kills all the soil underneath. It doesn't allow, or a lot of them do not allow as much infiltration as they should. And the problem with that as well is because you're putting that cloth, and then you're putting, most of the time they put rocks on top. A lot of soil and sand, debris that is coming from the roof gets to that area, and then it creates an extra layer of soil on top of the fabric, and then weeds start growing there anyway. So I know that people do it because it is low maintenance. I would recommend a French drain in that area as well, right? Yes, you're going to have to probably weed it a little bit more, but when it comes to like water conservation, I think that would be the best way to do it. And yeah, you can use rocks if you're not allowed to put trees, but there's always other plants that you can put there, like water lilies are a very good example, like blue lilies are good examples, not water lilies. Blue irises, sorry, are a good example of plants that can actually grow nicely in those type of ditches. And you can put rocks on the edges. But yeah, something like a French drain, I think, would be better, and especially if it's between two houses, which is usually like a narrow, just strip of grass. Yeah, but if they're going to put that cloth, it's even better to have just grass than that, unless you're going to actually do something to make sure that the water stays there. The grass will actually allow more infiltration than that cloth and the rocks. So that water is basically just flowing down and into the street and down the storm drain.
Great, thank you. Another question we have: I know there are some plants like bulrushes that will clean water. Can you list some other, please?
Sure. So I would say almost every single plant helps to take nutrients from the soil, from the water or the soil, because they incorporate them into their system. So when they talk about plants that filtrate water, what they mean is that they are removing the extra nutrients and sometimes even some of the heavy metals and stuff like that into their tissue. So water plants are very famous for doing that. So cattails can do that. Bulrushes definitely do it. Wild rice, like a lot of the most aquatic plants are actually good for that, and they will remove nutrients, but more specifically from the water. So unless you're talking about a pond, any plant that you put into your home, if you're talking about a pond, then definitely bulrushes is a good example. Cattails can help you with that, while rice is another good one. But if what you want to do is, if you're talking about a garden and how you can infiltrate or improve the conditions of the soil, any plant will do, as long as you have like a good combination, because some are going to use more nitrogen, others are going to use more phosphorus. So it is, if you put a good combination of plants, they would all help to improve the conditions of the soil around your area, because the water, like rainwater, does not have a lot of nutrients in it anyway, because it's this style water, right? So it won't have a lot unless whatever is left on the roof when the water starts raining, those are the only debris that are going to end up in your garden. I know, I think I went a little bit, I don't know if I was clear with that. I hope I was.
Okay, thank you, Beatriz. Thanks so much. If anyone, just feel free to unmute yourself and share your experience, or just ask any other questions. It was such an informative and detailed talk. Thank you so much, Beatriz. That was wonderful. All right. Well, as usual, feel free to email us any other questions. Oh, we have one more here from Carol. Why are showers more efficient than baths?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So usually because your like showers, because of the way the shower heads are usually more efficient and you do not spend as much water. Like if you're using a bath, you full the whole, the whole bathtub is actually full. So you're using more water every time. If you shower, unless it takes you like 20 minutes to shower, you're using less water per minute in the shower than you would use to fill the whole bathtub. So as long as you're taking short showers, it is more efficient than a bathtub. Like you use more water to fill the bath, and then it's like you're using the whole bathtub every time. So you're just using more water in the long term. That's a good question.
Thanks so much.
Amelia, can I put in something there?
Of course. Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, so I wanted to test that when I first heard it. And what I did was I had a shower, but I put the plug in while I was having the shower. So then I collected the shower water as I was showering. And it really showed me that you do use a lot less water showering than having a bath.
Thank you, Margaret. That's a very good experiment. I like that. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We do have a couple of announcements to make. Beatriz, do you have the slides for that, or?
I do.
Okay, perfect. We do have a number of seed ball making kits available for pickup. If you would like to make some from, at home, feel free to contact myself at programs@oakvillegreen.org. So they do contain clay, soil, seeds, and instructions. They're all packed. So feel free to email us and we can arrange for you to pick them up. If you can use them at your own properties, in your backyards, fantastic. If not, we'd gladly we'll be collecting them after to disperse in the pollinator gardens we're maintaining. And the other thing, our native plant sale is launching in the next few days or next week at the latest. So feel free to keep an eye on our website if you're interested to add some more native plants and increase local biodiversity. So last but not least, we're preparing something very exciting on March 24th. It will be an in-person event. We will be sharing details very soon. But just keep an eye and stay tuned. Save the date, March 24th. I believe this is a Thursday, and it will be held at Joshua Heritage Art Center. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Have a fantastic afternoon, and we will be in touch soon. And thank you once again, Beatriz, for your participation, for joining us today, and for your informative talk.
No, thank you, everyone. And again, if you have any questions, you can send it to like the programs email, which I think most of you already have. So it's programs@oakvillegreen.org or at my personal email, and I would be happy to answer. I promise I will send the list of native species. Hopefully my internet at home is working now and I can do it once I get there. But thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks, Beatriz.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.